You're listening to The Other 50%, a herstory of Hollywood. I'm Julie Harris Walker. This is the podcast where we talk to successful women in entertainment and hear their stories. In this episode, I got to speak with two women who are making a big splash in the theater world in Phoenix, Arizona. Brenda Foley and Tracy Liz Miller have started a theater company called the Bridge Initiative, which is focused on promoting the work of female and people of color artists. They're coming up on a festival they're calling the Bechdel Test Fest. How fun is that? Now, if you don't know what the Bechdel test is, it's this. The Bechdel test asks if a work of fiction features at least two women who talk to each other about something other than a man. And there's a bonus requirement if the two women actually have names. So, they will tell us all about their festival and their journey to Phoenix from New York and the inclusive community they are building there. You can find us at theother50%.com to see bios, photos, my musings on the blog, the coffee cups, the merch. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Overcast, Podbay, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all the places. And please do me a favor and share this podcast with one friend of yours today. And I have another podcast called The Other 50%, a herstory of tech. You can also find it on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or on the Other 50% website. And that is where I talk to successful women in tech and hear their stories. Okay, introducing Brenda Foley and Tracy Liz Miller as we talked via Zencastr over the internet. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us.
So first, I'd love to hear a little bit about your backgrounds and how your project came about. Why don't we start with Tracy?
Hi, this is Tracy. Well, I grew up in northern Michigan and entered into a BFA program for music theater performance at Western Michigan University. And then I graduated from there and did a couple of years of internships at professional theaters before entering into my graduate program at Alabama Shakespeare Festival, University of Alabama. And when I finished with that, I moved up to New York City and was a New York-based actress, director, producer there. And while I was there, I did an internship with the Women's Project in New York City. It's a very well-known off-Broadway theater company that came out of the American Place Theater and then eventually became its own 501c3. And at that time, Julie Crosby was the artistic director, and she was heading an initiative called 50/50 by 2020. And it really opened up my eyes. I completely was enthralled with the information I was learning. I was completely enthralled with the playwrights I got to be just in close proximity because I was just an intern. I was communications and media intern. So, but it just really influenced me and how I started to look at my own career, the opportunities I'd had in my career, the mishaps and challenges I've had in my education background. And then once I left New York City and moved to Arizona in my own preparation to learn about my new community that I was coming into, I took a good hard look at all the producing arts organizations in the Phoenix Valley, where I now reside, and saw a strong common denominator that there were very, very few women that were artistic directors, managing directors, or executive producing directors of any of the performing arts. And that told me that as an arts and theater maker, predominantly theater maker, that was something I felt I could bring to the conversation locally. And I started to look around and see about how I was going to do that and found that there was a grant through the Arizona Commission of the Arts on brand new initiatives. So it was a seed funding grant. And sort of put that on my back burner. Like I knew it was there. I knew it was something that maybe I should consider. But I really, at that time, didn't know how to make the approach until I connected with Brenda.
Let's step back a minute. The 50/50 by 2020 initiative, is that the same one that was looking at female film directors, or is this a theater initiative?
This one was initially well, you know what? That is a really great question. I should do some digging around. The 50/50 by 2020 that I was connected to was a theater initiative, but it may have very well had something to do with the film industry as well, because it was based in New York City, and as you know, theater and film and TV are all of those types of of our industry are represented.
Yeah, there's a lot of intersection. That's so interesting to me because I know there's a big push in the film world for 50-50 by 2020, and it only makes sense that actually it should be the whole world is 50-50 by 2020.
Right on.
But I love that there's a specific theater push for that as well. That's great.
Yeah, we even wore buttons at the time. Now this is several years back. Julie Crosby is no longer the artistic director, and for a while that conversation faded in New York City circles, and it's just recently, I would say the last 5-6 years, where it's made another emergence, coinciding with things like the Gina Davis Institute getting a lot of attention, the television network starting to promote their diversity in their producers and their casting directors. And so I think, it's kind of like you need to have it all involved to really make a strong impact. And I think that was what was necessary to bring it back to the forefront.
Yes, we should be doing it on all fronts.
Right.
Oh, absolutely. I actually just heard somebody in business talking about major boards, and she was saying that, executive boards in major leadership for these business organizations are looking to do it. I think she said 40% by 2025. They've got even farther to go, I think, than we do. But,
they do.
Yeah.
They do.
Ouch.
Yeah, but even even in the world of business, apparently that's starting to be something that they're aware of. This is Brenda.
People are starting to get it, and there's enough data that shows your bottom line actually increases when you have more women. But Brenda, let's hear your story.
Well, so my story is similar and yet not to Tracy's. I was a foreign service brat growing up. So my dad, we moved around because he worked for the State Department. And for me, sort of the one constant through my childhood was actually ballet. It was, whatever country I went to, whatever language they were speaking, I could go into a studio and I was at home and could do my thing. That sort of segued in high school for me into choir and singing and my appreciation and my love of music. I was never going to be a ballerina because I am not that body shape. So I just sort of ended up in music and then fell in love with musical theater, even though everybody wanted me to be doing opera. So I ended up landing at the University of Michigan as a musical theater major and pursued that, got my degree, went to New York City, worked in and around New York City for many years, like more than a decade, met and married my husband sort of in that span, and we had a child, at which point New York City started to become like a little more tricky to navigate.
Like really hard?
Like really hard. Like when you have a 20-pound child and a stroller on the subway, it just, you wouldn't believe how few places you can go that even have high chairs. You walk to a coffee shop to meet a friend and there's nowhere to put your kid. It's not a child-friendly city. So anyway, we kind of decided that, what's the next step going to be? And my husband has always wanted to be an educator, and we realized that in order to do that at the college level, he needed a master's degree. So he ended up at Arizona State University, which is how we landed in Phoenix to get his MFA in directing. And I kind of thought, maybe I'm done with this. I did my New York City thing, I did my tours, I did my this, I did my that, I did a little commercials here and there, just a little dipping my toe into film, not a whole lot, but I thought maybe I'm done. And I tried to just be mom for a couple years, and it just, the itch just really started to to bother me. I missed it. So I started back in a little bit of theater, and then there's just not a lot of union theater here. And actually even in the time that Tracy and I have been here, it's contracted rather than expanded the number of availability contracts that exist. So I started to segue more into film, independent film and video and things like that. And last year I actually ended up earning a third of my income acting, but it was not on stage. It was all video production stuff. But anyway, as Tracy said, we met. And she actually, her eyes were kind of opened by her experience in New York, and she actually is the one who kind of opened my eyes to the fact that, as a woman, you kind of always chafe against the fact that numbers are against you. But I just always kind of chalked it up to, well, I'm a little white girl who sings, there's a million of me, and it's just what it is. But I never kind of realized systemically how that is manifest sort of, I don't want to say from the top down, but when you talk about leadership positions, when you talk about who's writing, when you talk about who's getting produced, not even who's writing, because lots of women are writing, they're just not getting produced. So anyway, so Tracy started bringing this to me. We kind of looked around the valley and thought that there was an opportunity for us to apply for a grant, and that's what launched our little company.
I love it. Now, your company is called the Bridge Initiative?
That's correct.
Correct.
And what's the origin behind that name?
Well, this is Tracy, and I would say when we discussed titles, okay, so they landed us a big little seed funding. So it's hard to say big because in a seed funding grant and what we were about to approach, it seemed like, wow, that means they have faith in us. They're going to give us $6,000. That's all we got, especially in the film industry. That is nothing when you're talking about what it costs to produce films or television shows. But for us, it was a start.
It was enough to do something.
Right, enough to do something. And so we thought, what do we want to accomplish? And in all the things we wanted to accomplish, what really was synonymous within our mission was we wanted to reach the just graduated or soon to graduate from theater program students, so higher education students into the professional world. Because one of the stats, and I'm a teacher of higher education, is that 68% of all degrees in theater, and I think it's probably similar in film, are awarded to women, 68% of those degrees. But yet, when you look at who is in the leadership positions, such as the directors, the production managers, the producers, the artistic directors, the screenwriters, if you look at who are the people who are making the decisions as to what material is being shown in the world, then it's not women. It's like 19% or something like that. So what happens between when a young woman is raring to go and earns her degree and then attempts to forge a career into the professional field? What happens? And it can't just be the fact that we have uteruses and want to drop babies someday. It can't just be that, right? There has to be other forces at work. And so we wanted to make that bridge happen from the academic world to the professional world. We also wanted to make a bridge happen to women who are already established in one section of their career. Say they are successful actresses and they want to direct. They want to get behind the camera or helm a stage production. Or they're interested in the management side, the producing side, where they're the ones who are making the projects happen. How do they make that leap? And you have some fantastic women who have spoken on your podcast who have been in just that sort of situation, already established themselves as actresses, and yet now they want to be the ones in the room where it happens, to use that that phrase,
Hamilton.
right? Right. And so why are they not being able to make that? Well, part of the things that we've looked around is there's no one to be a mentor to them. There's no examples in our community, particularly in Phoenix. In the Phoenix Valley, there are very little resources allocated just for women in which to make up the difference. And so if you look at who has the experience and who's been mentored, it's not going to be women. So thus they won't have the connections needed to make that leap.
So yeah, as Tracy described, this is Brenda, the idea of bridging the graduates into a professional career, acting as the mentorship angle, also bridging people into a different area of their own career. So it just kind of became this image that came to us, and we decided instead of calling ourselves a company, like the Bridge Company, Theater Company, or the Bridge Organization or something, we really felt like a core part of our mission is education in terms of, as I said, Tracy opened my eyes. I think that there's a lot of people that don't even see it, don't realize what the struggle is that we're up against, and I believe it's one of those things where once you see it, you can't unsee it. But people go to shows that they've heard of, or they go to see a friend in something, and they're not really looking at who the playwright is, or who the executive director is, or who the filmmaker is who made that film, and all those things. They're not looking at the people behind it. But when you start to look at it, as I said, you kind of can't unsee it. So we felt like we called ourselves an initiative because we wanted to, as part of our mission, just kind of open people's eyes and create conversations, maybe get press, and not just be a producing organization.
I love it. And that seems to lend itself then to whatever opportunities come to you guys, and not limiting it.
Absolutely, and things have fallen in our laps. We did a very interesting project this past winter that was a play by a playwright from Baltimore that she had done at a palliative care, because she's also a doctor, at a palliative care conference. And she said, you know what, the next conference is in Phoenix, and I found you guys, and I would like you to help me produce my play. So she raised the money. We found the actors. Your friend Daniela Tellerico, she ended up directing it for us. We paid everybody. We made it a professional little production that was produced at this conference. I mean, it's nothing that we ever would have gone seeking ourselves, but it was wonderful. It was, a play about the end of life care that doctors provide, and it was kind of for training purposes for these people to see it enacted. So that's, again, our mission is broad and our net is wide.
Yeah, I heard that particular production was very moving.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, it had really good feedback.
Great.
Good.
So I know you have a festival coming up called the
Yes.
Bechdel Test Fest, which just the title of that is so delicious. Tell me about that.
Yep.
Like, you get it right away.
Well,
Yes.
Right?
I mean, we do, but again, this is our education mission. A lot of people have never heard of the Bechdel test. So that's become a great talking point. It's very catchy, but the Bechdel Test Fest, it kind of rhymes, it's kind of fun, trips off the tongue, but when you actually get into it and people go, oh, wow, it's really kind of a cool realization.
And the Bechdel test, this is Tracy, the Bechdel test is such a basic approach that people think, that doesn't really matter that much. But even if you break down the statistics based on the Bechdel test, the very basic model of it, people think that's extraordinary that so many films don't even pass that. So many.
Mm-hmm. Well, and so what we decided to do for the past couple years, so we launched in 2015. So this is literally, we're closing in at the end of our third year. But our first 2 years, we did playwriting contests that were national contests. And we were kind of sitting in the corner rooting for our Arizona playwrights, like maybe we can get somebody local who, has written this beautiful play. But alas, our first play winner was from New York City, our second one was from LA, which would be what you would expect, the places that nurture their writers. So this year we kind of thought, we had 4 semi-finalists in our most recent contest that were from Arizona, and we felt a little guilty that to this point we haven't spent a lot of time working with them. So we decided it would be really nice to have a festival. And also we had men approaching us saying, we'd love to have our plays read by you. We write really great women characters. Can we be involved? And so we kind of put our heads together and we thought, let's do a festival of only Arizona work. Let's open it up to men. If they can write a Bechdel-worthy play, great. And we obviously had our scripts read blind, so that there'd be no judgment based on the name attached to any given script. But we thought, let's apply that same test to plays as well as, and we're going to do a film screening component of our festival as well. We can talk about the film scene here in a moment, but anyway, we did it we decided, because we're creatures of the theater and our company was founded in theater, to do a focus of mostly theater, but also incorporate the film into our Bechdel Fest.
I love it. And it's funny what you were saying before, once you see it, you can't unsee it, and you can go for years not seeing it.
Mm-hmm.
I was also a musical theater major, just like you guys. And you go to auditions, and you are one of 500 white girls standing there, and they all sang better than me, so I never had a chance. And it doesn't occur to you that not only are there 500 white girls going for this part, but there's only one part.
Right.
Yes.
It's not like there's 15 parts they're trying to catch.
Of course.
No, and my educational experience reflected that throughout. My graduate program was a classical acting MFA at Alabama Shakespeare, and in my class we had 3 women and 5 men, and the class previous to me and the class that came in after me had 2 women, 6 men, because they knew if we're going to train these women, we're only going to train a few of them, really, because there's only so many roles. So in the classical theater world, it's so similar. And And we even did a project that addressed the classical theater world, where we did a gender-swapped reading and weekend exploration of Richard II, which is a sort of one of Shakespeare's more obscure plays, but it actually lent itself very successfully to the experiment because no one had any tremendously preconceived notions going into the play, and we gender swapped it, and it was a weekend full of professional artists and students exploring like the economic structure that how this is affecting the theaters economically in the US. If so many theaters are producing Shakespeare and there's only going to be 2 roles, how many women are not ever being employed?
Exactly. And when you go further back, like when you look at a high school production, it's 90% girls.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yes. And then you'd be like asking so-and-so's little brother to come in and play a role so that you could do the play, right?
That's good for the boys. If they only knew once you get out, all the professional opportunities are for men.
Absolutely.
And I love that you're focused on the bridge between the educational experience and the professional experience, because that is the mystery gap.
It is. Yeah. It is.
If you have, I didn't realize it was as high as 62% coming out of art schools.
68. 68. Yeah.
I assumed it was at least 50-50, and then the first 97% of jobs go to men.
Right.
There's something going on there. So I love that you're taking deliberate action to close that gap.
We're doing what we can in our little corner.
We are.
We all have to just do our part. Mm-hmm. So you're doing your part.
I was going to say, Julie, is that, again, part of my experience growing up and growing into my industry is if I did encounter a female leader, first of all, she was revered beyond. And second of all, there was not always, I can't use that term, but there's a general assumption that she really had to fight to get where she was. And those common monikers came about. She was a bitch. She was strident. She had
ambitious.
A scrap. Yes, she was too ambitious. She had to scrap her way to get there. Oh, she's divorced. Well, of course she is. No husband would want to live with, those stories circulated around. And so what 20-something woman would go, ew. I mean, who wouldn't go, oh, I don't want to be that. So I think.
I don't want to be shrill.
Yeah, those preconceived notions. And then the idea that, and this is not a judgment. This is just an understanding in that these women who most definitely did have to scrape their way up to the top, there was only room for one woman in the room. So by God, she was going to be competing against the few other women that dared to try. So the idea of helping each other up was a foreign idea. And there was a patriarchal situation where pitting women against women was going to serve the men. So I experienced that all the time. So I'm just trying to cite some of the things that I experienced as a young 20-something artist. So this is the stuff we're trying to counteract. That we need to be competitors. No more. We need to be colleagues and comrades and assist each other and reach down and pull each other up.
We need to have a tribe.
We do.
Absolutely. Yeah, this is Brenda. We actually just held auditions within the last 2 weeks for this upcoming festival. And it was so gratifying to see so many women across the age spectrum, across the color spectrum. And many of them came in and literally said to us, thank you for doing what you're doing, because there's this recognition of sisterhood, and we need to be helping each other, as opposed to, as you said, you just get so used to this spirit of competition. I think I spent my 20s not liking women because I was, I was afraid of them. I was in competition with them. I don't even know, but they set it up for you. It's sort of put in place, and I bought into it that, if I become friends with her and then she gets the job, then I'm going to be jealous and as opposed to let's all root for each other and create opportunities. And I just, now that I'm in my 40s, I value that. I value the sisterhood so much. And I'm just grateful that we're in a position to be able to give back that way.
It is so important. Now, what kind of response are you getting from your community at large?
This is Tracy. It's interesting. Like, we have a lot of people who are like, "Oh, you're amazing. I've heard what you guys are doing." So, I mean, Brenda's mother-in-law had someone say to her in Florida, the Bridge Initiative. I have heard of them. That's, like, we have like a national following, and locally we have that same sort of go for it, we're so excited you're here. What we really need to start cultivating is the audience that comes out in support of the work, that it isn't just chick lit on stage or on screen, so it's not just for the girls to go see, that it's theater for everyone that happens to serve female artists. So it is legitimate, high-quality plays and films we're producing at this festival, and it just so happens to be done by female artists.
Isn't that funny that there's still the stigma of something made by a woman must only be for women and must be of a lesser quality?
Gag.
Yeah. But unfortunately, it's true. I mean, we've spoken to male critics, drama critics here, and they profess to be on our side, which I don't want to say that's disingenuous. But, at the end of the day, one of them, after having a half-hour interview with me, said, well, why should an audience care? I don't think they care. And at a certain point, all you can say is, well, they should. And maybe I think, and I'm an optimist in terms of I think they will. Again, my theory of once you see it, you can't unsee it. I think a lot of it, I don't want to call it ignorance, but it's just, people aren't aware of it. It's an awareness gap. But as Tracy said, we are facing a challenge. Phoenix in itself, I mean, both of us are relative newcomers to this area. Tracy's been here 5 years, I've been here 6. And so we're just kind of learning what it is to be an artist here. And unfortunately, the art scene is not very supportive in the professional realm. It's very much of a community theater area. It's very much of a sports town. And I think, unfortunately, consequently, the quality thing that Tracy's stressing, there's some amazing people who work in the community theater here, but they're not used to there being a professional scene. And so people expect theater to not be good because they've seen a lot of theater that's not good. And honestly, the film scene as well. I've done a couple quality things, a couple really not quality things, and we put out a call for films for our festival, and we did not get a huge response. We got, I think, 2 feature films and like around 12 or 14 shorts. And but neither of our features actually ended up passing the Bechdel test. Our shorts, we had...
Sad.
Yeah, which is sad and slightly not surprising. But I can't tell you how many calls for films around here are strictly horror, are some kind of action thing. Yep. Like, it's almost exclusively men, or like lots of nudity, lots of violence. There's just not a lot of content that is anything I personally want to do, but also beyond that, like, I'm just starting to find female filmmakers, but because they haven't had the infrastructure and the support, a lot of their work is not as strong. So, we included one in our festival that's less strong, but she's an emerging female filmmaker of color, and we just wanted to give her an opportunity.
And there's, that wasn't always the case. This is Tracy talking. It wasn't always the case in Arizona. There was a SAG office here. There were tons of movies that were being shot, westerns that were being shot here, and there was a very healthy movie scene. But the state government of a couple of administrations back, and then has continued forward, has cut or diminished altogether any sort of tax breaks for filming in the state. And so now
they also got rid of the film office, which was a huge problem. My understanding from filmmakers around here is that was even more of a problem than the tax break, because if people wanted to come, they didn't have any resources to connect them with venues, locations, people. They just were at sea. So we do get occasionally filming, like Transformers filmed here, but they literally bring everybody in from LA and then bring everybody home. They just don't, there's no resources here. So they're just relaunching a film office. But it's a nascent scene here.
Yeah, I remember in the 80s it was huge, and there was a lot of work there, and a lot of commercials being done there, just constant work. I was there in the 90s, actually working for a commercial house, and it was just when it started to wane
Yeah.
a little bit. Yeah, because with the incentives, you just can't even compete.
Right.
Nope.
And with that, the talent fled. A talent fled to LA, most likely.
Yeah. So I think you just have to look at it as it's a long game, and it's an evolution, and it's building. It's building.
Yeah.
Right.
But I think you are totally doing the right thing.
Thank you. Thank you, Julie.
And we have to get people to put their money where their mouth is. And I've been thinking that it's part of it is, since we've all grown up in this culture and we've all been conditioned to think stories about particularly white men are the normal stories, and everything else is other and an exception and a niche market. And men don't think, I can't speak for men, but just the response I get from men with the podcast, they don't always think that stories about women are for them, whereas stories about men are for women. So it's reconditioning a whole society that stories about all people are for all people.
Correct. It's marketing. It is awareness, as Brenda keeps saying. And even one of I'm not going to speak too much about it because I commend the director that submitted this feature film, but it's ultimately a female story, yet there was a male protagonist who was going to come in and save the day. And it reminded me so much of those 80s film or 80s television, 80s and 90s television, where there's this damaged but yet still sexy and attractive white male protagonist who shows up and is going to save a particular, whatever the subject is in that episode. So like even the women who are being saved had so little dialogue. So it really wasn't their story. It was this guy's story who was coming in on his white horse.
Right. Brenda, you wanted to say something else.
Yeah, thank you. I've heard this expressed from, gay friends and friends of color that, they grow up having to imagine themselves in, if they're a little gay boy, they're imagining themselves in the female romantic lead so that they're kissing the man. Or, the people of color are watching, the big Hollywood blockbusters and imagining other people of color in front of them because they're used to seeing the white people. And so everybody except the white males are used to that, making that leap of putting themselves in somebody else's shoes. But white men have never really had to do it. So that's the leap that, people of color are doing it, gay people are doing it, women have always done it. If there's a hero, as Tracy said, who's going to save the day, most often it was a man. So if you pictured yourself as the hero, you pictured, you sort of transmorphed it in your head that you could become that, but it was imagined because on the screen it was a man. So we're used to doing that. And that's why women were seeing Wonder Woman this summer and crying, because it was actually, oh my gosh, there's the hero that is saving the world literally, and she actually is a female. But men are not used to doing that. White men are not used to doing that. And so I think the more stories that we can get out there that have these strong characters, and that's again why we love the Bechdel, because it's not that romantic comedies are bad. Like, it's great to have romantic comedies. We all love love. A lot of us love men. But the problem is that when you're not seeing women in positions of leadership or positions, seeing career women or seeing them in the position of being a parent, or they're just in relation to men as like secretaries or romantic interests, you're not seeing these fully rounded people, these fully rounded characters. And so when we start telling those stories, maybe men will actually realize, like, oh, I can use my imagination the same way that all of these other underrepresented groups have had to for, as long as we can remember.
Forever. Okay, let's talk about Wonder Woman for a second.
All right.
I found myself, like, my disclaimer is I don't even like superhero movies. But I went to see it. I went opening weekend. I'm doing my part. And I found myself crying in the first 5 minutes. And then I went home and read a bunch of reviews where a lot of women were having that experience. And it wasn't even while they were fighting. It was when they were standing there owning their power.
Yep.
That I'd never seen before on screen.
And they're not wearing a bikini at the same time, right? So
Right.
So they're just gorgeous, strong women, which is very emotional. It's so emotional for us.
Yes.
Yeah, I think it's this is Brenda. I think it's a very primal, like, guttural reaction that so many women had, because it's not even something you're thinking about. It's, as you said, it's not didn't tend to be the battle scenes necessarily. It was just like, here is the person that's going to save the world, and it is a woman. You're just not used to seeing that, and it was like this. Your heart just wanted to burst of recognition of, like, yes, because I don't know about you, but, like, I look at the world right now and I go, I wish there were a lot more women in power. I wish there were a lot, because I think a lot more decisions would be made differently at the moment than are being made. So it just, it touches on all of those levels just in a very almost primal, I don't want to say animalistic, but just, it's a feeling thing. It's not a thinking thing. It's not an intellectual thing. It's just like a gut level reaction to it.
Like you didn't even know you were missing it.
Exactly.
Yes, that's a great way of putting it, Julie. That's fantastic. Right.
Yeah, but yeah, it was visceral.
I see it as an educator when I get young female students into a stage combat class, or which is also film combat. It's the same sort of teaching strategies, and they are allowed to take a stick and maybe attempt to hit somebody, even though it's pretend. And then what starts to happen to them as they practice this art of stage combat or screen combat, that it just gives them this sense of power over their own body and control over a different story they could never have imagined themselves in before. And I think this is the same sort of feeling that women are getting when they're watching Wonder Woman on screen.
Yeah, that's so true. I remember being in stage combat and loving sword fighting,
yes!
and I was really good at it. Yeah. And then I realized a friend of mine was, kind of a Shakespeare expert, and she would say there is one scene in Shakespeare where a woman wields a broadsword.
Yep.
One.
Yep.
And so she did that scene every chance she got.
Yes, well, and consequently, Julie, when we left, like, our skills, although we were pretty freaking good, I gotta say, when I came out of my stage combat and got my actor combatant training, then it waned and atrophied because I never had an opportunity to use it. Mm-hmm. So when I 4 years ago got to play Hippolyta and the opening scene of Midsummer Night's Dream, and the director's like, I think I'm going to have you fight. I'm like, yes! But I had to I had to brush up those skills, because in my span of 15, 20 years of professional stage, I wasn't using those skills.
Right.
So yeah.
That's all we have to say about that.
So there.
Bye.
Okay, I'm going to ask you each of this question individually. Tracy, are you a success?
Yes. And I can honestly say this is within these last couple of years is the first time I felt that. And it has to do with my daily purpose. Where I'm able to channel energy and intelligence and training and education and experience towards a goal, and I see it making a difference. And this is in my educational life as well as the Bridge Initiative.
Brenda, are you a success?
Yes, and I'm with Tracy in terms of it's taken me many years to get to that point. I think you're kind of raised to see it as some kind of external goalpost, whether it's a credit on your resume or some kind of recognition or award or something. Then you go through this period as a performer, like, oh, did I not get my Broadway credit, or did I not work with so and so, or these things. And I sort of towards my end of my time in New York, I started working with a Tony Award winner as my voice teacher. And we had some real heart-to-hearts, and she just opened my eyes in so many ways. And she kind of said to me that, you're the way your voice is and the way you look and all these things, it hasn't lined up yet, but in 10 years you're going to work all the time if you stick it out. And I'm thinking, like, well, I can't wait another 10 years, what's that going to do to me? But also, I watched her with her Tony Award and, all of her success and her film credits and whatever, saying, I just wish I had a patch of grass. And I just, and here she is teaching voice lessons because she doesn't have, the next job lined up. And, there was a part of me that just, like, really looked at her not in any way as a failure, but as like a cautionary tale in a way of like, is this what I want my life to be setting myself up for? And if it is, fantastic. And if it's not, then maybe I need to reassess. And so for me, I kind of looked at it and was like, I don't want to wait another 10 years. The roles that I was right for, I wouldn't even want to do. I was watching Kelly O'Hara, who's my peer, play a leading role in South Pacific, and while she's having her child at the same time as me, and I thought, I'm just happy to be going home to my kid and not singing I'm in love with a wonderful guy. Like, that just is not appealing to me right now in my life. So in terms of being a success, I feel like, people come up to me now and say like, oh, you're such a role model and you're inspiring me. And, these young women are saying like, I never would have thought that I could audition for this role, but, I got cast as this part that they thought was a boy, but I want to do it, and I did, and you guys have inspired me. And I think that is, it's infused my own work. I think I'm a much better actress than I was even a few years ago. I'm much more confident. I think it's made me a better mother. I'm very aware of what messaging I'm giving my daughter. I feel very successful in all different kinds of areas now that I've kind of owned my own power in a very different way. And I think that consequently it's affected every area of my career in a very positive way, and I'm booking more than I ever did, and I kind of don't care as much as I used to in a weird way, but I feel much more successful than I had been.
It sounds like you are both in alignment with what you're meant to be doing.
I definitely feel that, Julie. I do, and in terms of like just as listening to Brenda, it just so struck me at my heart as well that I grew up with very able-bodied role models in my life, and my mother and my grandmothers, intelligent, educated women, yet their frustrations with their opportunities have heavily influenced me. And so now as a mother, I am, similar to Brenda, equally conscious of what it is I am telepathically giving my daughter, and I want her to see me loving what I do, engaged in my community, doing what I can, and not end up a bitter person wanting more at the end of my road. And that's, to me, also affected me in my relationship with my partner. He sees me in a different light now than before we had our daughter, because now he has a young female under his care, and so it's changed our perspective. It's changed our relationship and perspective with each other, and it's he is the biggest cheerleader in my corner. He's really sort of insists that I lean in more than I think I should in many ways. Encouraging me to take projects that seem like, oh, well, that's daunting. And he's like, no, I think you totally could do that. And you should do it. And, Brenda and blah, 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 you guys do this. And he's always seems to be present when Brenda and I are having our sometimes after the kids go to sleep meetings. And we get off of our phone and or Skype or whatever it is, how we accomplished it at 10 o'clock at night. And he's like, the two of you just get shit done. And he's like, that's amazing, he said. And he reflects upon his experience as a male trying to navigate similar producing or theater or artistic challenges. And he said, you guys just get shit done. I said, well, we don't have any more time to waste, honestly. We don't have any more time to waste on the stuff that we struggled with when in our 20s and early 30s about, as Brenda was addressing, like the competitiveness and the lack of trust and the lack of leaps of faith. And we just got to get to it. And we just get together and say, okay, do you feel this way? I feel this way. Or do you feel this way? And then we make a decision and move forward. And we don't let it saddle us with any worries or fears that, oh geez, maybe I totally offended this or that or whatever. We forgive and move on and are effective.
Yeah, it's been amazing. Our board is still kind of codifying itself. We have amazing women who've kind of surrounded us, and it's taken us a while to sort of identify who's going to be here kind of for the long haul, because initially when we first started, was people were interested, but they weren't really sure who we were, and they would say they're going to commit, but then they would disappear. So Tracy and I kind of did everything, but we've kind of started to identify the people who are going to step up and are going to be there and are going to help apply for grants and all the rest of it. And it's just been fascinating to be in these meetings with a dozen women. I mean, we're not talking 4, we're talking like 12 women. And in the course of an hour and a half, people are polite, people listen to each other, people compromise, people throw out ideas, people feel supported. And I don't know whether that would change if there was a male in the room. I like to think that it wouldn't. And we have not said that there's no men allowed to be involved in our board, because we would be happy to have a man or two. It just has fallen out that it's only been women, which is a whole nother discussion. But anyway, it's just been so gratifying to see how well we work together. And, there's this perception of women can't work together, or they're too emotional, or they can't make decisions, or they want credit, or they're too, I don't know, insecure, or like whatever it is. But that has not been our experience. We have people that are just, really supportive of each other and of us, and it's just been really lovely to find that.
And everyone's got these great stories that they're like, this is what I've been dealing with, this is what I've had in my life, and it's always like, it seems to always have this common entry point into why they can't take the shit anymore and why they want to do something about it. And we feel safe in sharing that part of it. Okay, great. That's what you've gone through. So now moving forward, let's focus on what we can do to move forward.
Yeah, the women are rising, and it's a beautiful thing.
Mm-hmm. It is.
And going back to what you were talking about with your husband, Tracy, I just want to verify with you ladies. Is it true that there is nothing sexier than a man who is a feminist?
Oh, yes.
Thumbs up. And when they also are taking on the duties of cleaning the house, even better. Because, they're just wonderful. I mean, they're taking care of our daughters while we're doing 12-hour days to complete these projects. And it's marvelous.
Yeah,
so spread the word, everybody.
I could not do it without. I don't know how single mothers do it. I have an amazing respect for them. Obviously, you put your head down and you get it done. But I could not do it without my husband. He's just incredible.
That's great. Now, Brenda, are you a badass?
Am I a badass? Wow.
Can I answer that?
You'll get your turn.
I want to answer for her.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I'm sure other people identify me as such. I don't know that I would self-identify as a badass.
How do you define it? Okay, Tracy, are you a badass?
Yes. Proudly, and I would lump Brenda Jean Foley in that category along my side. We're in a community where no one else has attempted to address this, and there's been a lot of dressing room talk or holding room talk, or however you want to look at it, of just frustration, and we're the first ones doing it. Now, I think part of the challenge of others who may, and this is not a criticism, but life happens, and family situations arise, and education must be completed, and the constant effort to move forward in their own career makes it difficult for them to see the broader scope of things. And so I get that. I was there. I feel it. I can recognize a person who is not quite ready to dive in. But that's why we just need to persist and continue, so that 5 years from now, when they are ready to jump in, we will still be there.
It's wonderful. No, you're going to build a sustainable thing.
We hope to, yes, instead of one-off. And that's also why people are now showing up. It's because we've been around for a couple of years and we've accomplished some things.
Yeah, it takes some consistency for people to believe.
Oh, I absolutely. Like I do think that there is, unfortunately, a theory here that it's theater. If it's a theater, it's a community theater. If it's a community theater, the quality is going to be so. You're not going to get paid. People are flaky. Like there's just there's quite a perception to combat. So I think at this point we've had a track record of combating it. We've paid everybody consistently, obviously not as much as we would like to, but we have always paid and insisted on that because we believe that artists are professionals. And I think our reputation is finally starting to allow us to reach the next level of support.
Okay, now tell us how we can find you. Tell us where and when the Bechdel Test Fest is.
The Bechdel Test Fest is going to be co-presented and hosted at the Tempe Center for the Arts, and that will be September 9th and 10th. We have 2 full, gorgeous days, delicious days of programming, starting off with a kickoff to the whole event, and then a panel discussion of a diverse panel of men and women of all backgrounds, ages, and people of color, and we're posed the question: why the Bechdel Test Fest? Why the Bechdel test? Why diversity? Which will be, I think, it could very well be one of those determinate moments where someone goes, "Oh, okay, now I understand." And we'll then move through a wonderful series of programming that includes full-length play readings of local playwrights, film showings of these shorts, a wide range of genres and styles of filmmaking. We'll also have a workshop geared towards actors, but certainly anyone in the industry and whatever can come into, so they learn skills, not just sort of guessing, particularly those who are coming from the educational environment into the professional world. There's a whole lot of anxiety, and I remember that. How do I navigate this? There's going to be children's workshops. Now, this is not a workshop to indoctrinate children on the reason feminists should be happening. And that's what I kind of get a raised eyebrow. Why is the Bridge Initiative wanting to do a workshop for my kids? No. It's about, let's have a really, really good time playing theater games for 2 hours that will have wonderful learning outcomes while our parents get to go listen to a play being read. That's really what we're doing.
Yeah, it's essentially childcare, but it's for $10 for 2 hours, and your children are on site with you getting, a class. So it seems like a no-brainer to us as parents, but it's
because and that makes it so accessible for people who
that's the goal.
Yeah.
Yes, that is. We did a survey, and that is one of the barriers, one of the many barriers as to why women don't feel they can participate, is they don't have childcare. So that's something we're trying to address. And then we'll end with a celebration of short plays, and then have an afterglow offsite from the Tempe Center for the Arts. But all of that information will be available on our website, which is www.bridgeinit.com. And then also our Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter accounts are going crazy right now with all of the preps for this.
And
I will link to all of that on my website too.
I do want to this is Brenda. I do want to acknowledge, to this point, we've been very, very blessed to receive grant funding from Arizona Commission on the Arts, and the city of Tempe are actually our grantors for this festival, and we would not be able to do nearly the scope of programming without their help. So we're really, really glad to be able to say thank you to them. Those funders are enabling.
Absolutely. And in addition, the artistic director of the Tempe Center for the Arts, Ralph Remington, has we connected with him. He's a recent move to Arizona. We connected with him earlier, fairly early in his time living in Arizona, and he leapt in with both feet, saying, "Yes, we will host a program. You just bring a program to us and we'll do it." So we have gorgeous space and a gorgeous location and wonderful facilities.
It's fantastic. Now, going back for a minute, Brenda, how would you answer that question, why is diversity important?
So I've been thinking a lot about this because Tracy and I are going to be hosting a panel, or moderating a panel to launch our festival with this question. And to me it's important because we live in a diverse world. And once again, if the only stories that we're seeing or the only decision makers that we're listening to are of one gender or one color, it's not representative of the world. And as aware as I am, I can never step into the shoes of, one of my board members who's a 19-year-old Muslim girl. And her perspective on the world is just so completely, vastly different from mine, and I learn from her every time I speak with her. So I feel as though diversity is key to this world getting along. I think, Charlottesville is a crying, what happened there 2 weeks ago is a huge crying shame, and it's an example of people that are afraid of people that are other than them. And if they would just meet each other, if they would let anybody into their home and have tea with them. I mean, there's a thing going around, an article going around of an African American man who's sort of converting all these KKK people by just becoming their friend. I think
it's so simple.
You would think. So the idea, I think that it's important to have these voices out there, these people up on stages in front of each other, just breathing the same air, hearing perspectives, just broadening what we have to say, because I do write myself, and I do think that I try to write characters of color. I put them in my screenplays all the time. My writing partner is half Chinese, so we both feel very strongly about diversity, but we always, if we write an African American character, we give it to a bunch of African American people that we know and say, are we doing something wrong? Is there anything that feels false? Because we want to make sure that we're representing them on screen, but that being said, we're never going to write their stories the way they will. So I think that the idea of diverse voices and diverse casting and diverse people who are choosing programming, it's all part and parcel to the same idea of getting stories out there and having people in this world meet each other and learning that we are all human.
Yeah, that's it. Tracy, do you have anything to add to that?
Well, she said it so perfectly. It's hard to add to it. I would just maybe say that, I posed the question, how many wonderful stories, how many wonderful leaders, how many wonderful artists have we not met in our lifetime because they didn't have the opportunities to then guide them to a place where they could finally have their voice be heard. And to me, that sort of breaks my heart. If you can just have empathy and look at it and turn it into your own story, which everyone can do. We all have that ability. If you could just think of it as if this were you, if you were so limited that you didn't think you could do what you are doing right now, and that you had an alternative universe that you could take a look at, well, there are people around us all the time who are living that alternative universe. So taking in their story you're only going to find commonality and connection, which will then spur you forward to want to hear more of these voices.
Is there anything we haven't talked about that either one of you wanted to say?
I have to say, I have high hopes for our festival. I'm hopeful that people will discover it. I'm hopeful that it is not going to be only women and that we're going to kind of be preaching to the choir. I hope there's a lot of men who attend. I hope there are people who are skeptical about feminism who attend. I hope that they see these stories and, as Tracy was saying, see themselves in these other stories, maybe for the first time. And I want to say that it's been a little frustrating to say we're the Bridge Initiative, Women in Theater, and have 90% of the men you say that to shut down and say, oh, okay, I'm not involved in that. We are not an exclusive company to women. We do have men. We love men. We're, both partnered to men. And, so it's less about excluding the men and more about including the women. And so
it's not I love that meme that goes around. It's not pie. If you take a bigger slice, it doesn't mean that the people have a smaller slice. It just means we have a fuller, richer table if we're all allowed to step up to it.
So if men go to your festival, are things going to be all their fault, and are they going to be attacked?
Oh, gosh, no. Gosh, no. We will have men on the panel, for one thing, so they're just starting the event. They'll hopefully get the tone that it's not about men bashing. Those days, I think, are over because they weren't ultimately successful. They weren't. We can't divide us. We can't divide us. We can't be us against them in any scope, whether it's diversity or gender.
Well, even Wonder Woman had to leave the island that was only women, It's like...
Right. We can't live on an island. As Brenda was saying, it has to be diverse and inclusive. Otherwise, we're just hurting ourselves in the long run. So no, they will not feel attacked. They will not feel... What they'll see and what they'll hear is fantastic work, fantastic art, wonderful stories that just happens to be either written or produced perhaps by women or with the Bechdel test in mind.
Yeah, none of our plays or films have any anti-male message at all. I can't think of one of them.
Okay.
So, yeah.
I mean, I can't imagine that they would. I just want
to absolutely. It's a great question because, as I said,
it is a great question.
I've just had so often the experience of a man literally shutting down visibly when I say that I have a women's theater company, and it's just I find it dispiriting because the truth is, like, we don't feel that way when we meet the artistic directors of the male, that are men. We don't sort of go, oh well, there must be no place for me here.
Right.
It's unfortunate that I don't know if they feel threatened. I don't know if they think that because it's women are running it that there's going to be no men involved. I don't know. I don't know what they think because we have hired hired male directors. We have, like I said, we were looking for male playwrights. This particular festival, we had a few apply. The scripts we ended up choosing, as I said, read anonymously and blindly, did end up all being female writers, which says, I'm not sure what that says, but regardless, men were offered a seat at the table in equal measure. We have males in our casts, so it's not like we exclude men. We're just as
we had men curators.
Yeah.
We had men curators of the work.
Yeah.
So they were weighing in on quality just as much as women were.
Yeah.
So are all the stories about periods and vaginas?
And it's all the women are sitting around talking about men. No, they're not about that. There are stories.
I'm just kidding.
I know you are, but you're right. You're approaching it with humor, which I appreciate. Yes, it's stories that are journey stories, mysteries, family dramas.
Dealing with grief, just very human things. There's one that's just funny, just very sort of these existential almost skits that are just
absurdist comedy. It's all wonderful and all very diverse in what kind of story you're going to see.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining me on this.
Our
Julie,
pleasure.
thank you for having
Absolutely.
us. Thank you so much.
You've been listening to The Other 50%, a herstory of Hollywood. I'm Julie Harris Walker. I'd like to thank Brenda Foley and Tracy Liz Miller for sharing their stories. Go see the Bechdel Test Fest September 9th and 10th and go to my website for more information. And special thanks to Jay Rowe, Danny Rosner, and Allison McQuaid for the music. Please find us on iTunes and subscribe and leave a review. And of course on our website, theother50%.com, all spelled out in letters, for added features, bios of our guests, pictures, merchandise. You can also follow us on Facebook and Twitter, all the social media places. And don't forget to check out The Other 50%, a herstory of tech. Thanks for listening. See you next time.